all. We are glad you're here, and let me say to our fathers, happy Father's Day. You do so much for our families, and I know our families certainly do appreciate what all you do for the family. So happy Father's Day. Those of you who use a digital Bible to read along, today we don't have Wi-Fi in the building. We got a little Wi-Fi problem going on, so you're going to have to use your data, your cell phone provider data. Be no Wi-Fi in the building, so do apologize about that. We want to remind you of our online Bible classes. We have Bible Investigation. That is simply your questions and Bible answers, one question a day. Fundamentals of the Faith is doing a study of Romans. On Tuesday, we'll be reviewing chapter 11. If you do not have already the review questions for chapter 11, they're up here right now. They'll eventually go back on that table back by the fake palm tree. Also, I want to remind you of one of my favorites, that is Christianity 101. This class is not really for us, it's for your five. It's the people that you love who are not faithful Christians. So please keep in mind Christianity 101 and encourage your five to watch that class. Now, I'm excited. I've been waiting, kind of encouraging Billy to select a topic for his class. He has selected a topic. I'm now glad to promote it. I'm talking about it on Facebook. I'm going to talk about it here. And that is the book of James. On September the 6th, for 13 weeks, Billy will be in here, an auditorium class, teaching the book of James. So please keep that in mind. I know he'll do a great job on that book. And by the way, I keep on promoting it on Facebook. Share that so other people will know about that class. Then, starting on September the 13th, 1 week later, I'll be doing a 12-week class over in the big room on how to share your faith. How do you share Jesus with family and friends? I was made aware of a new method at the Freed-Hardeman Lectureship, and I want to share that with you because I think it's a method that could work here in Hot Springs. So that is how to share Jesus with family and friends. Because here's a fact. Most people, not everybody, but most people become a Christian not because of the elders, not because of the preacher, not because of the deacons, not because of a Bible class teacher. Most people, they would attribute their decision to becoming a Christian to the influence of a friend. So, hey, that friend could be a family member, could be just a friend. But that is something that is true, and we want to know how to influence people. The ladies are going to move over and give me their big room. I appreciate that. We do have a notebook for that class. I want to make sure I have enough notebooks. So if you're going to be in that class, please sign up in the back by that fake palm tree. That way I'll have enough notebooks for you. What will we do in that class? I'm going to give you some new tools that I discovered at Freed-Hardeman that will help us. We're going to be talking about primarily two methods. We're going to give you a lot of knowledge. Every class, all 12 classes, you will have a sheet of questions that the Christian needs to know. These are Bible facts that you need to know. Now, if you want it graded, you'll turn it back to me and I'll grade it for you. You don't have to have it graded. That's between you and God. But if you want it graded, I'll be glad to grade it for you and turn it back to you. Also, this class is going to be a lot of encouragement. So I'm looking forward to that class. 12 weeks over in that room, beginning on September the 13th. Don't forget our family memory passage, Deuteronomy chapter 21. If a man has committed a sin deserving of death, and he is to be put to death, and you hang him on a tree, crucifixion. His body shall not remain overnight on the tree, but you shall surely bury him that day, so that you do not defile the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. For he who is hanged is accursed of God. This would be crucifixion. This would be hanging on a tree. Remember, the Jewish leaders went to Pilate wanting the bodies to be taken down. You know, they didn't want the bodies to remain on the cross, the three bodies, Jesus and the two thieves. Now, if you want to understand God, understand Genesis, because Genesis introduces us to the characteristics of God, His mercy, His grace, His love, and His justice. Now, let's review. We're in chapter 28. This is a pivotal chapter, a very pivotal chapter in the life of Jacob. In fact, I would say this is one of the two most pivotal chapters in his life. The Jewish people would be called Israelites. Why? Because they're descendants of Jacob, and his name, Jacob, is going to eventually be changed to Israel. He is fleeing for his life. Now, he's going from Beersheba to Haran. Depending on the route, 450 to 500 miles. In fact, let's look at that route. He's going from Beersheba, down here in the south, to Haran. Haran today would be in Turkey. It's on the Turkey-Syrian border, but today it would be on the Turkey side of the border. Now, it looks like, we can't say for sure, but it looks like Jacob is taking the Judean hillside path. Now, these roads are not these, today we have modern roads and they're nice and paved and it's easy and convenient. Roads back at this time were more like a path, just a path. And it looks like he's taking the Judean hillside path. Now, there's another path to Haran. It went over this way. This path is about 450 miles. The other one is about 500. So I always like to say, let's split the difference, make it 475. Now, how's he traveling? He could be traveling with a caravan. He could have servants with him. He could have camels and donkeys and supplies. But I doubt it. I don't see that happening. In fact, in this chapter, he will ask of God, just give me food and clothing. I think that's all he had. It's my opinion, and I can't prove it, it's my opinion that he's traveling by himself with just some food and clothing on his back, and that's it. Now, why would Isaac send Jacob away like that? Because keep in mind, Isaac had inherited all, except for some gifts given to the other sons, Isaac had inherited all that Abraham had. And Abraham, let's just call it, he was filthy rich, okay? Abraham was just rich. So why would Isaac send his son away like that? Remember, Jacob tricked him. Remember, Jacob took advantage of his disability, his blindness. Remember, Jacob, along with his mother, had deceived Isaac. How would Isaac feel? Not very happy. Now, he does give the blessing of Abraham to Jacob, but that is we got to do this because that's clearly Jacob is now the chosen one. It's clearly Jacob now is the chosen one. So he may have begrudgingly gave him the blessing of Abraham, but he doesn't give him anything else. It looks like he is traveling by himself. And he stops in an area that we today call Bethel. Back then they call it Luz. These paths would go along near major cities. Now, why would a path go near a major city? Well, that way you can go into the city and buy your supplies. You know, you're traveling, you could stop and then go into the city and buy your supplies, come back to the path and continue your journey. Now, he stops at Bethel. Bethel, as I said, this time it's not called Bethel. Bethel means house of God. Notice the EL ending. If you see a name in the Bible, it has an EL beginning or EL ending. That is a reference to God. He stops at the house of God. Let's continue on now by looking at study number 151. We're looking at verses 10 and 11, up to verse 11. The sun had set. Sunsets, sunrises in the Bible are common images of distress, sunset, deliverance, sunrise. Let's look at that. Genesis 15:12. Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Verse 17. And it came to pass, when the sun went down, it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. Chapter 19, verse 1. Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening. Sun is going down. Coming there during the evening. Sodom represented evil. And John, let's go to the book of John. John, of all the writers in the New Testament, John paints the most vivid pictures. Notice what he paints here, verse 30. Having received the piece of bread, this is Judas at the supper. He then went out immediately, and it was night. Evil. John wants you to realize this is evil here. Judas is evil. This sunset will begin Jacob's dark journey through which he must struggle. He's going to struggle with humans, primarily Laban, his uncle. And then he's going to struggle with the Lord himself. The true daybreak for his soul will not come until the end of his 20-year exile. Go with me to Genesis chapter 32. Genesis chapter 32, verse 26. And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. This is Jacob struggling with a divine being. I believe, and when we get to this chapter, I'll talk about why I believe it. I believe he's struggling with God the Son. I believe he's struggling with Jesus. So he said to him, what is your name? He said, Jacob. And he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. Notice what Jacob calls this place. He calls it, go down to verse 30, P-E-N-I-E-L. Peniel. E-L ending. What does that mean? It means literally, I have seen God face to face. For Jacob, his life can't get very much worse, can it? He's fleeing from Esau, most likely traveling by himself, lonely for the first time, and without all of the trappings of riches that his father had offered him back when he lived at home. You know, back at home, he was the son of the patriarch. Now he's just a traveler, traveling. This is a different life for Jacob. Verse 11, one of the stones. What seems ordinary? A nameless place, at least for Jacob this time. He doesn't realize what it is. And a simple rock will not remain ordinary. The rock anticipates the building of a sanctuary. Bethel would become to the Jewish people a sanctuary, a special place. Put it at his head. What does that mean? Well, it's a little bit fuzzy here in the Hebrew. It may be there for protection. Maybe he puts it there for protection. Or maybe he puts it there to put his head on. Now, I can think of 100 other things I'd rather put my head on than a rock. But maybe he's using it as a headrest. Or maybe he's using it as protection. 1 Samuel chapter 26, verse 7. Notice, there Saul lay sleeping within the camp with his spear stuck in the ground by his head. That phrase, by his head, is the same phrase that's translated, put it at his head, here in verse number 11. So he's either got a rock there for protection, or he's got a rock there for a headrest. Now, why would Jacob need protection? The guy that wants to kill him is only 60 miles away. I mean, he's not so far gone that Esau can't follow him. Remember, Esau is a hunter. Hey, Jacob could be hunted by Esau. Is he using that rock to have it there to protect him from Esau? Or maybe to protect him from bandits? Or maybe even wild animals? So what? Practical applications for living today. Here's your second so what for verse 11. You know, we talked about this becoming a sanctuary for the Jewish people. Right now, it's just a land and a bunch of rocks. Here is the practical application. God doesn't need a $1 billion building. He just wants your heart to worship Him. You know, in our world today, there's been a lot of fancy buildings. I don't know if there's ever been a building built that's $1 billion, but there's been buildings built that were multi-million dollar buildings. God doesn't need that. He just wants your heart. He just wants your obedience. God is in no need for money. He owns all the treasure of the world. What He wants is your heart. We give out of love. We don't give so that God will have some money in the bank. That's not the purpose of our giving. Now, verses 12 through the first part of 13. Let's read verses 12 through the first part of 13. Then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder. Your Bible may say stairway. I'll talk about that in a moment. I prefer ladder. I'll tell you why. Then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set up on the earth. This is noteworthy. In the Hebrew, this denotes the ladder comes from heaven, it doesn't come from earth up to heaven, it comes from heaven down. Okay, that's important. We'll get to that in a moment. A ladder was set up on the earth, and its top reached to heaven. And there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am. Let's stop right there. Go with me to John 1. Because Jesus is going to reference this. John chapter 1. Let's go to verse 49. Nathanael answered and said to him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus answered and said to him, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, most assuredly I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. In Genesis, the angels are ascending and descending on the ladder. Here, they are ascending and descending on what? It's not a what, it's a who. It's the Son of Man. It's God, the Son. It's Jesus, the Christ. Jesus is saying, I am the ladder between heaven and earth. I came down from heaven so that you one day can go from earth to heaven to be with God the Father for eternity. Let's look now at these key words. Verse 12, he dreamed. To this point, we do not know of Jacob ever having a vision from God. We don't know of Jacob to this point of ever having an encounter with God. This is his first. Depends on how you count it. There'll be 8 of them. Some people would say 7. I'll get to that later. But I count it as 8. Okay, I divide 1 into 2 parts. He will have 8 encounters with Jacob. Wow, that's a bunch. That's even more than Abraham. It's a lot more than Isaac. It's even more than Joseph. Jacob will have repeated encounters with God, and God is the one who takes the initiative. He surprises Jacob with the dream. Can you imagine Jacob is out there sleeping? Now, what kind of sleep can you get when you know, well, my brother is on the warpath and he's wanting to kill me, and he could be on the trail right now. He could be just, he could be coming over the hillside any minute. Can you think of that? Not a very good peaceful sleep. And suddenly God gives him a surprise. This dream is hope for Jacob. Behold. Now, let's talk about this ladder. Modern Hebrew. Now, keep in mind, the Hebrew language almost became a dead language. Almost, not quite, but almost. Hebrew University in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and in Jerusalem, revived the language. Modern Hebrew would translate this as stairway. Now, how do you know how words are handled? Often we figure out how words are defined by going to other occasions where that word is used and see how it's used. We kind of deduce, we kind of figure it out. This is a word that's only used one time in the entire Old Testament. I myself prefer the old definition, ladder. I'll tell you why. Why did we get modern Hebrew seeing it as stairway? Remember the Tower of Babel back in Genesis 11? The Tower of Babel was a ziggurat. It's called a ziggurat. There were a lot of ziggurats built in the Middle East. What was those ziggurats used for? Pagan worship. The priest would ascend the stairway to the very top. He's up there on the top. He's up there, going toward the clouds. And he has an encounter with their idol. When I see the word stairway, I think of those ziggurats. That's not what God is trying to picture here. I prefer the old ladder as my way. As I said, some will have stairway. Ladder. It's a flight of steps accommodating the ascending and descending angels. So what? Practical applications for living today. Just like here in Genesis 28, God speaks to us, not in a vision. He speaks to us through His Word, the Bible. He speaks to us through our prayers to Him. He speaks to us through the encouragement we receive from fellow Christians. God speaks to us today, but not in a vision, not in a special revelation. He speaks to us through His Bible. Let's continue. He set it up on the earth. In Genesis 11, they built it from earth up to the heavens, up to the clouds. This ziggurat. Here in the Hebrew, it's very clear. This ladder, you can picture God, taking the ladder and just bringing it down and then setting it up on the earth. The initiative comes from heaven. The initiative comes from God. Angels of God. Angels. Angels are pretty important. They are messengers of God. They are servants of God. These angels are here at this first encounter. Remember, we're calling this Jacob encounters a divine being. Later, he's going to encounter a divine being when he wrestles with a divine being. But notice Genesis 32, verse 1. Before he wrestles that divine being, notice 32, verse 1. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. Met him. Angels at the beginning, when he's leaving the promised land. Angels at the end, when he returns to the promised land. Remember, God had said, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to bring you back. It's going to take 20 years. You think Jacob ever gave up? You think Jacob ever got a little bit discouraged? Jacob could lean back on this vision and bring hope over discouragement. Ascending and descending. This motion is an image of connection between the divine, heaven, and the human side, earth. So what? Practical applications for living today. Here's the second one. God has reached down. Will we reach up? God has done His part. He's given us His plan of salvation. But will we reach up through obedience and grab that life preserver? The funny thing about life preservers, life preservers on ships, a person on the boat can throw you a life preserver, but you got to grab it. If you don't grab it, if you don't grab hold of it, if you don't use it, it's useless. God has done His part. Will we reach up? Now, study number 152. Jacob meets a divine being at Bethel. Let's continue on here in verses 12 and 13. The Lord stood above it. Now, this phrase happens often in the Bible. The Hebrew is often translated as upon it or beside it. Let me give you some examples. Genesis 18. Genesis 18. Okay? So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. That's the same phrase that's translated above it here in chapter 28. Let's go to chapter 24. Chapter 24, verse 13. Behold, here I stand by the well. Stand by. Same phrase, same Hebrew phrase, translated above it here in chapter 28. This represents the Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Jacob, when he wakes up from this vision, when he wakes up from this dream, he's got a decision to make. Will he worship God? Will he give God the glory? Will he give God the praise? Or will he just pass over it? We'll look at that in just a moment. Now, verse 13. This is the first one for verse 13. So what? You know, all these words are just words if we can't apply it to our lives. Here it is, the first one. God stands above us always. Go back to what we call the Great Commission. That's the phrase we call it by, Matthew 28, 18 through 20. What did Jesus say? Let's get the exact quote, okay? Let's don't paraphrase. Let's get the exact quote. Matthew chapter 28. Matthew chapter 28. And Jesus said, and lo, behold, take note, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. The Christian never goes by himself. With God, you have a majority. With God, you are a force to be reckoned with. With God, you're never alone. Isn't that comforting? Because see, Jacob here is alone. As I said, we have no indication in the Bible by Moses that Jacob has anybody with him. We have no indication that he has servants. We have no indication that he has a caravan, that he's got animals, that he's got, wealth of supplies. It seems like he is traveling literally by himself. And now, he knows he's not traveling by himself. He knows God is going with him. Now, let's look at the rest of 13, 14, and 15. The Lord stood above it and said, I am. What was the name that God gave Moses? I am. People are going to ask, well, who sent you? Who caused you to be here? Just tell them, I am sent you. I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father. Oh, what, God? You made a mistake. That's his grandfather, God. God knows what he's saying. God did not make a mistake. Abraham is the father of all of God's people. Doesn't matter if he's your grandfather, your great-grandfather, or your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. He's your father. Because he's the father of the faithful. I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. See, he didn't call Isaac his father. Isaac had started out so well. And Isaac, the last half of his life was not so great. I am the God of Isaac, the land on which you lie. Now, can you imagine, sleeping on the ground? How many of us have ever slept on the ground? We went camping, and hey, was it Was it nice? I mean, was it comfortable? No. Camping is not the greatest. For Lisa, camping is Holiday Inn, okay? She likes a hotel room. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants. God had given this promise to Abraham. Now God himself is giving the promise to Jacob. Now, Isaac had given him the Abraham blessing, but that's Isaac doing it. That doesn't count as much. This is God. This is God doing. Also, your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. Is he married at this point? No. Does he have any children at this point? No. No, no, no. But he will. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and the east. Circle that word abroad. We're going to come back to that. That denotes military action. To the north and the south, and in you and in your seed, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. You're going to be a blessing, you deceiver, you schemer, you heel catcher. But we're going to have to get you away from a situation that's going to not build your faith, but hurt your faith. If he had stayed home with Rebekah and Isaac, that would not have been a situation that would have built his faith. He would not have become the great patriarch that he becomes if he stayed at home. He needs to be separated from that bad influence of Isaac. And Isaac had become more worldly. He needs to be separated from that bad influence, and he needs to be what? Taught some lessons, which he will be taught in a very unique way. And your seed, all the families of earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am, once again, that's the name for God. I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. You're not going to be by yourself. You're not going to be alone. And will bring you back. I'm not just sending you away, I'm bringing you back to this land. For I'll not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. That's a lot of promises. God, are you sure? Yes. God is saying, I'm going to do this. I will mold you. I will help you grow. I will be with you, and I will bring you back. And when he becomes Israel, it's more than just a limp that he'll end up with. He'll end up with a changed life. Let's look at these verses. And said. The wording here shows clear dependence on the promises made to Abraham way back in Genesis 13. I haven't forgotten my promise to Abraham, and now you are the benefactor of those promises. I am the Lord. Let's look at Genesis 15, verse 7. Genesis 15, verse 7. Then he said to him, speaking to Abraham, I am the Lord. I am. Genesis chapter 26. Genesis chapter 26, verse 2. Then the Lord, this is also I am, appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. This is God speaking to Isaac. Now, in Exodus chapter 6, verse 3, God says that he was not known before by the name Yahweh. This is a new name. This is not a contradiction. When we get to Exodus 6, verse 3, eventually I'll explain why it's not a contradiction. Verse 13, the God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The revelation to Jacob is God rubber stamping the blessing that Isaac gave in chapter 28. Remember, chapter 27 is that blessing that he was planning to give to Esau. Chapter 28 is the important blessing. And this is God rubber stamping that blessing. Other words, I'm going to make it happen. We don't have to worry. We don't have to depend on Isaac making it happen. I will make it happen. Jacob is the inheritor of the covenant. So what? Practical applications for living today. Will you trust God even when it doesn't make human sense? Why would this not make human sense to Jacob? More likely he's by himself. More likely he has very little with him, and he's fleeing for his life. Does Jacob look like a man on top of the world at this point? I mean, if a newscaster had been on the scene filming this story, would he have said, "Here's Jacob at the peak of his life"? No. Jacob is near the bottom of his life, having to flee, having to run, having to go to a land he does not know, and having to depend on someone other than himself. Did you catch that? You see, Jacob to this point had always depended on himself. I'll figure it out, I'll scheme, I'll deceive, I'll get what I want, I'll trick my brother out of his birthright, I'll listen to my mom and we'll deceive my dad. But now Jacob is coming to realize that he needs somebody other than himself. Why do we often go to God when the problems just rush in? Why do we often turn to God when tragedy strikes? Why do we often seek God when we don't know what to do? It's because suddenly we realize, I need help. When we realize that we're not the captain of our own ship, when we realize that we can't make it on our own, we turn to the one who can make the difference. And that's God. That's God. He can make the difference. God can use any situation. Romans 8:28. He can use any situation for the good if we'll just let Him use that situation. I will give. Salvation, this is salvation. Salvation is a surprising gift of God, not gained through human manipulation. What Jacob had, he had manipulated. He had schemed, he had deceived. We can't deceive God, we can't manipulate God, we can't trick God. It's a gift. Romans 6:23. For the wages, thank you. We got 5 minutes. Get your questions in by text, and we'll get those questions on the Facebook feed. Descendants. Same promise given to Abraham. When Abraham received it, he was married but childless. Well, here, Jacob's not even married. And God is saying, you're going to have descendants. The land on which you lie, the covenant blessing to give Abraham, the land of Canaan, is here adapted to be the immediate situation. I'm going to give you the land literally on the land on which you lie. So what? The last one for verse 13. Is God the God of your family? Here in verse 13, God says, I'm the God of your father Abraham, and I'm the God of Isaac. Is God the God of your family? You know, today we celebrate Father's Day. We have so many wonderful fathers. Are we making sure that our family knows God? Now, let's look at our questions. Got a good question here, I'm sure. Let's look at it. So, if you have to get away from toxic, unhealthy family to grow in spirit, like Jacob, how does that keep you from breaking the commandment to honor your mother and father to live a long life? Excellent question, because I've had that question asked of me. You know, I tell people it's kind of like the office of president of our country. I will always honor the office and what that office represents. That office represents leadership. That office represents our country, freedom. But I have to tell you, there have been some occupants of that office that I have not respected because of how they have lived their life and how they have operated as president. So there are some people that I don't agree with who have served as president. I'll be honest with you, a lot of them I don't agree with. But I always will honor the office. I tell people who have maybe a bad father or a bad mother, I tell them, honor the office, honor that position, but don't agree with them. Don't let their mistakes, don't let their sin overrule your life. You live for God, no matter what they may say. I actually helped a young lady several years ago who was a resident of the children's home in Paragould. I helped her to divorce her parents. You heard me right. I helped her to divorce her parents. Her parents had actually prostituted her at the age of 6. And they were trying to get her back through the courts. We took action. I testified because I knew some of the story. And the courts ruled that she was emancipated. She was 16 and she was emancipated. In other words, her parents had no longer any legal connection to her because she didn't want to go back to that. She was a good girl. I was so proud of her. She had become a Christian, and she did not want to go back to that because they had prostituted her at the age of 6. Horrible people. Horrible people. I told her, we can honor the position of motherhood. I said, one day you'll probably be a mom. In fact, she is a mom today. And you'll have a husband, and he'll be a father to your children. Honor that position, but don't copy what your mom and dad did. Don't let their bad decisions affect you. So that's how I would answer that question. Good question. We will start on verse 14, Lord willing, on Wednesday night. Appreciate it so much.